Back in 1997, something really cool happened. A game arrived where every character on screen had a rare build. A game featuring a brutally innocent and unlikely hero fighting against the tide of a company whose lines must perpetually go up and to the right. A punishing platformer with a simple idea. That idea being that of an undermanned commoner looking out for his own people. A befitting arsenal be damned, hell was going to come with him, and lives would be spent on the stairway to dignity. During one silly little fella's quest to become a savior to his own kind. Along the way, he would become not only a sort of unofficial mascot for the original PlayStation, but also the figurehead of a beloved franchise and the axis from which one of my favorite worlds in all of gaming pivots. And then in 2014, they decided to do it again. Roll the intro. Alright guys, context. Guess the new intro's hanging around for a while. Never let them know your next move. Before I start straddling between the past and the farther past and going in depth on my experience about an 11-year-old game that is the reincarnation of an almost 30-year-old game, I must first tell the story of how I arrived at the decision to do this game. So originally this was going to be a Kingmakers video, right? But, you know, we see how that all turned out. Hey, you remember this quote? Well, I'm on to the next thing. Got a couple things working their way through the pipeline that I'm excited for. Yeah, that was one of the things in my pipeline. My sadness is palpable. Then I tried to do the 08 version of Dead Space because I'd rather start a shotgun than drop $60 on a game that I didn't have any pre-established hype for. However, despite all of my esoteric surgery done to make a game that was never supposed to be on PC perform well on PC, the game refused to make it past the initial loading screen. Guys, it was crashing so hard that I almost filled out an insurance claim. So I requested a refund. Feel free to tell me how there's a super easy fix that could be done if I open the text files, splatter the goat across a public building, and play tic-tac-toe with Lord Nyarlathotep. I'm dying to hear it. I started looking around again for a game that would make for a worthy topic of conversation, when suddenly, as if it were a crowbar swung by God's most violent theoretical physicist himself, it hit me. I found Abe's Odyssey, and then I found New and Tasty, and then I did enough reading to determine that New and Tasty could indeed be considered a good remake, as long as you're not asking Reddit, and now we're here. In the interest of properly setting the stage for why I went with this game of Abe and his strange adventure, we must start at the beginning of my awareness of the franchise. My first experience with the Oddworld universe came in the form of a demo for Oddworld Montage Odyssey. The demo was on a disc for Halo Combat Evolved, and something about it drew me in. A demo for Fusion Frenzy was also there, but we're not talking about Fusion Frenzy. The world of Oddworld is bathed in contradiction. Straight ahead corporate death cocooned into aspartame-riddled corporate doublespeak. It was obvious from just playing that one demo back in the day that I was only just scratching the surface. Later on, I eventually ended up getting my hands on Montage Odyssey, and I enjoyed it thoroughly enough that I knew that at some point I'd have to dive into the rest of what this franchise has to offer. Fast forward a number of years and enter New and Tasty. New and Tasty is a remake of the first game in the Oddworld quintology, Abe's Odyssey. I'll get to there being a quintology, guys, don't worry. Now, you'll notice that I didn't say remaster. They didn't just add/adjust some textures, touch up the lighting, tweak the studio panorama, and call it good. Nah. Oddworld Inhabitants whipped out their lasso and pulled in co-developer Just Add Water to help with this game's reincarnation. Between both Oddworld Inhabitants and Jaw, they went frame by frame, kinda sorta, and built Abe's Odyssey anew with modern tech and contemporary quality of life adjustments that would serve to hopefully make it a better jumping off point for potential new victims. Fans of the series, and no stone was left unturned. Even the dialogue was re-recorded.
I had just got past those slugs when the strangest thing I saw.
I had just got past those slugs when the strangest thing I saw.
But before I get into the changes that exist between the original build and the rebuild, we've got to start from the beginning. That's right. Manufactured food scarcity. Don't worry, guys, this will all make sense. So anyone who has done any amount of reading into the Oddworld franchise has undoubtedly come across the name of Lorne Lanning. Lorne Lanning, at least from what I've watched and read, is a very interesting person. He studied at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, studying photorealism before then going and studying at the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia, California. To hear him tell it, by the way, there's an absolutely brilliant interview with him on the Ars Technica YouTube channel that I'm sourcing some of this from, I'd recommend anyone watch it. He was always a more creatively driven individual who wanted to do more than just subsist from what it was that he created. He had stories that he wanted to tell, and the concepts for these stories, like any good work of fiction, were being pulled in from different real-world experiences in his life. Something he spoke about which really stuck out to me was something that anyone who has ever done any sort of retail/food service gig has witnessed. You see, once upon a time, he had a gig driving a forklift in the South Bronx, and he noticed that if, say, a shipment of fruit were to arrive at the facility perfectly ripened, then that shipment would have to get claimed on insurance, as the food in question would be far past ripe and no longer fit for sale by the time it was distributed to where it was meant to go. And juxtaposed to this, in the areas around his work, I'll let him tell it.
I would see people that were starving, cooking dogs. I've seen dogs on spits with people with bonfires on a road. But you were looking at some real desperate shit.
And there we go. Before Lorne Lanning knew it, the seed for one of the key cruxes of Oddworld was planted within his brain. Lorne Lanning eventually ended up meeting a person named Sherry McKenna, and he ended up pitching a somewhat fleshed out idea for the overarching Oddworld story, a quintology that starts with Abe and ends somewhere. I don't know. The quintology never got finished. I'll blame EA for it. More on that later. Now, Sherry was impressed with the idea, and to paraphrase, was somewhat like, fuck it, 5 movies it is. But Lorne, well aware of the practical challenges that come with creating a 5-part movie series, as by this point he had been plying his craft at Rhythm and Hughes Studios, which is also coincidentally where he met McKenna, well, Lorne reined her back in and said, no, 5 games. We'd have to buy and flip several Central American countries to have the capital to fund 5 movies. You know what? I'm going to keep it a buck with you real quick. I made that joke up. But the first part's true. Either way, I guess she got on board because before long, Oddworld Inhabitants was founded between the two, and their first game would be Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey. See? I told you all it would make sense. Before I go on a stark raving rant about what Abe's Odyssey brought to the table from a technical standpoint, and by extension what went into the new and tasty reanimation, I want to set the stage for the Oddworld franchise, thematically speaking. Now, it's obvious from the outside looking in that Oddworld has a lot to say, like a lot of good media that's out there. I mean, guys, let's think about it for a second. Fullmetal Alchemist has an underlying theme of accepting your past for it cannot be changed. Evangelion has themes revolving around the fact that while personal connection is hard and vulnerability is naturally painful, isolation will never be the key to unlocking one's happiness. Akira talks about the fact that if you become a godlike, nigh omnipotent being, your t-shirts won't fit anymore. You know, it's the basics. Oddworld's themes are rife with the consequences of over-industrialization, ecological obliteration, and resource depletion, which is cool. There are a lot of films /documentaries /songs that have been made about the importance of keeping our own particular little blue space rock in decent health, but the message doesn't beget quality. You don't get to duck legitimate criticism of your fictional story just because it touches upon some genuine real-world issues. This is escapism after all, not instruction, and my nihilism-filled spirit is already well aware of the fact that the world do be sucking sometimes. With that said, this game conveys its themes in a way that make you feel. The writing, it speaks for itself. It's less like a PETA commercial with odd bestial undertones featuring the unwitting supplier of my next spicy 2-piece dart from the nearest Popeyes, and instead it feels more like the ramblings of whale vagina-based death grind outfit Cattle Decapitation's delivery of their themes of human-driven environmental ruin. You know what they're on about. You know exactly what they're on about. They have all the tact of a jackhammer in that regard, but you also can't help but to vibe with it. That sort of tightrope act is one thing that this series is known for, and Abe's Odyssey / New and Tasty are no exception. I mean, for goodness sake, in the opening cutscene of the game, it shows our soon-to-be player character inadvertently coming upon a meeting of the RuptureFarms leadership and finding out that the leadership's idea for getting their line back up and to the right involves slaughtering, packaging, and selling its own workforce to the general population in exchange for coin. Guys, I'm gonna be real. If this game got any more on the nose, the possessor of that nose would have 2 black eyes. Now, admittedly, my experience with the original Abe's Odyssey is minimal at best. With that said, I will bounce back and forth between the original and the remake because this is still supposed to be a new and tasty video after all. It's just hard to talk about new and tasty without bringing up what came before it. I'd like to think that I at least did my homework. Going back to the beginning of Abe's Odyssey, production for it commenced in 1995, subsequently leading to the game being shown off at E3 twice before its eventual release. Once in 96 with a private screening, and again in 97 with a near-complete version of the game. And from a technical perspective, the original Abe's Odyssey did some things that were quite curious. For starters, this game came out during the 5th console generation, and while everyone and their mother had made the decision to try and grasp all the growing pains of the shiny brand new 3rd dimension by simply headbutting the learning curve until their nervous systems turned into flavorless banana pudding, the fine folks over at Oddworld Inhabitants decided instead to stick with the 2nd dimension and simply make something that would have been comprehensively impossible on previous hardware. The game used the Alive engine, and with it they were able to do some neat tricks to get the most out of the PlayStation 1's hardware. While I personally struggled to really explain how it all worked, the result first and foremost yielded a clinic in aesthetic presentation. The backgrounds in Abe's Odyssey were originally all hand illustrated before being digitally enhanced. The habits we see in games today, with assets being used and reused, didn't exist here because they all began life in some form or fashion as something that someone drew by hand. The result is backdrop after backdrop with a laser-focused attention to detail and complete awareness of the space. I mean, it's really interesting. We don't see stuff like this anymore. Now, what's a game's environment without sound? The sounds present here were fantastic. Complete with all these little flourishes and cues that let you know exactly what was happening. A good example would be the way the music changes every time you take over a slig. The movement, though, is where things get really interesting. Now, while part of the movement was overhauled for new and tasty, it still emphasized the fact that your movements must be measured and deliberate. It's almost like if Dark Souls was a platformer. In Abe's Odyssey, it seems like the movement kind of happens on a grid. This is aided by the fact that the camera does not scroll with you. The screen that you are on in that moment is simply where you are. For all intents and purposes, the rest of that level does not exist unless the Langoliers vomited it forth due to the overwhelming power of indigestion. This leads to something curious. That something being that in most platformers, in the event that you catch yourself in a tight spot, you can sometimes just spaz out on the controller and end up making your way to safety. In Abe's Odyssey, and in New and Tasty for that matter, that shit doesn't work. If you spaz out on your controls here, you simply get the joy of watching Abe die a miserable death. Now, you can still move quickly, don't get me wrong, you just can't move carelessly. And that, my friends, is the key. The game is composed with the weight of unyielding consequence in all phases, from the cutscenes, to explosions, to even environmental hazards. Everything here is almost mechanical in the way that it lurches forward. Even the Elm rides in the middle portion of the game have weight, and I don't know how the hell they pulled that off. Another important part about the way the game plays revolves around the combat, specifically how utterly helpless Abe is while still having the tools to handle his business. Oddworld Inhabitants gave themselves the interesting task of finding a way to make a cinematic platformer where the main character couldn't directly fight back. The games were hell-bent on driving home the point that on paper, Abe was hopelessly outgunned in every way. Now, we've all seen games where they tried to make the point of your main character being hopelessly outgunned, only to give sane main character a weapon that equalizes your main character against all the evil that Evil Group Incorporated could muster, and thus resulting in the employees of Evil Group Incorporated having the privilege of their thinking noodles being unnaturally evacuated through a brand new visibility port on the backside of their craniums. We've all seen the pattern before. This game breaks that cycle. The way a lot of combat situations are handled here is through chanting.
It smell like straight motherfucking pussy out there.
Abe has some sort of mystical power that evades comprehension and allows for him to possess sligs. Sligs, of course, being these weapon-toting, squid-faced, robo-legged fellers, so long as there isn't a floating C-block there to disrupt his ambitions. And thankfully, sligs have all the firepower that you need. This possession mechanic makes things interesting. It's a hell of a way to get around the quandary of making your player character meek in his entire totality, while still being able to handle his business in a way that doesn't shatter verisimilitude. It honestly makes the sections of this game that have some sort of combat into a bit of a puzzle. Granted, the question and answer is always the same. It's always blatantly obvious what it is that you need to do. You know, splatter sligs. It's not like Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver where the game just gaslights you with unmatched belligerence belligerence and only yields itself to you once you've caught it in its own lie. Shifting gears from mechanics to reception, the overall impact of the original Abe's Odyssey is quite simple to observe. It sold well, it was reviewed well, and it became the launch pad for the much-loved Oddworld franchise. The franchise spawned a bonus game, a direct sequel, and a disastrously consequential spin-off. If you remember, I stated that Abe's Odyssey was meant to be the start of a 5-game series. However, after getting shoehorned into putting out Abe's Exodus faster than the speed of sound, that's a whole other story for a whole other video, the company then proceeded to experience success with the aforementioned Montage Odyssey. With that said, in an attempt to broaden the appeal of the Oddworld name, Oddworld Inhabitants decided to put out a first-person shooter entitled Stranger's Wrath that was enjoyed by critics, but failed to turn a profit, which leads us to the real villain here, EA. EA, by all accounts, withheld desperately needed coin that would have gone into the marketing of Stranger's Wrath. That withholding of this coin did not set up Stranger's Wrath for long-term success. I mean, look, I was aware that it came out back in the day, but I was also an avid G4 viewer back in the day as well. The filthy casuals, not so much. The failure of Stranger's Wrath, among a myriad of other things, caused Oddworld Inhabitants to push for release from the nihilistic Galactus' foul grip, a release that they were granted. Now, after temporarily shelving the series because, well, Oddworld Inhabitants lacked the funds, they actually stopped making games for a while. They started working on a movie. It's a whole side quest it's worth going into on a different video. They decided to come back to video games, and evidently they must have found the funds somewhere because, hell, here's New and Tasty. Now, as far as the development itself goes, I had a hard time finding specific notes about what all went into the development of New and Tasty, but there are still enough differences between the original and the remake that are worth talking about. Like I said, my experience with the original game is minimal, but there are things that are obvious. There are a litany of quality of life improvements between the original and the remake, the most important of which being the addition of quick saving. You thought I was going to talk about the scrolling screen, health bar, or difficulty selector, didn't you? Nah, fuck that. The Paramite nests will never see my soul again. Alright, beyond quick saving, time for the other more obvious things. The camera scrolls alongside your main character in New and Tasty as opposed to having preset screens. This has its pros and cons, a list that gets surprisingly long the more you look into it, running the gamut from strategic implication to actual level layout adjustment to make it all work together seamlessly. It required a lot of doing to make a scrolling camera work without breaking the game's balance and pacing. With that said, if their aim was to make things a bit more user-friendly for new players, then I believe this scrolling camera goes a long way to achieving that goal. Also, interestingly enough, during the development of New and Tasty, there was an idea being thrown around to have two different versions of the campaign, one with the scrolling screen and one without, but it was abandoned, I'm sure partially because it would have been a monolithic undertaking to achieve. Another key point is the number of free roaming Mudokons to save. Oh, I almost forgot. So there are a bunch of Abe's people that are hanging around. You can get them to follow you by using the game speak mechanics, which are fun to use. It kind of replaces the need for having a drop-down menu.
Everyone,
Hello.
follow me.
Wait time already?
And then once you have a whole gaggle of them following behind you, you go find a plague of pigeons flying in formation and chant, causing the pigeons to make a portal for your friends to escape through. It's awesome. Abe's Odyssey had a total of 100 Mudokons to save, with 50 being the requirement for the good ending. New and Tasty has a total of 299 Mudokons to save, with 150 being the requirement for the good ending. By the way, in regards to the endings, through my typically terrible play that I often show off here on the internet, I was able to secure footage for both endings. More on that when the time comes. Now, beyond some of the smaller things, like the fact that, like I stated before, New and Tasty does actually have difficulty selection, and the fact that this game ripped the health bar straight out of Montage's Odyssey, I want to talk a little bit about the graphical overhaul. When this game was rebuilt, it was rebuilt frame by frame with a new engine. The Alive engine was out, and it was replaced with Unity. One thing that has admittedly had people divided is the impact that this has had on the lighting. The amount of bloom that was added from the past to the present is rather jarring.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Which, I suppose with having the screen now follow Abe, it would make it hard to find a way to make the dark areas super dark without adding unnecessary frustration from a level design standpoint. I mean, these bats are bad enough without everything being to where you can't see it. Don't worry, guys. We'll talk about the bats. That, and there also seems to have been some tweaks to the art style as well. Admittedly, there is some division about this as well, and if I had died 1,000 deaths in the Paramite nests on PS1 back in the late 90s, I could see myself being frustrated about this as well. With that said though, I didn't. So personally, I wasn't too pressed. As you may recall, my first experience with Oddworld came in the form of Munch's Odyssey, and the art style present here in New and Tasty seems a bit more similar to Munch's Odyssey, which personally I don't really have a problem with, mainly because it's still Oddworld, and that signature juxtaposition of corporatocracy-driven crimes against nature and the desperate attempt of the ruling machine to make the situation seem not as drastic as it actually is still clearly present and humorous. It's just heavier on the cover-up than it was before. Alright guys, I've yapped for too long. Time for the campaign. My friends, if you all wish to avoid spoilers for this game, whose story is actually worth experiencing, unlike the story of the last game that I just did, then by all means, leave the video, and then maybe come back after you played the game. But if you're down for what's about to show up, then by all means, heat up a scrab cake and let's have at it. This game wastes no time setting up the main conflict that will drive the plot of the story forward. This is RuptureFarms, the plot's engine of economic avarice with a name so metal that I'm surprised that a band hasn't co-opted it yet as the name of their studio project. I mean, look, the band Shadow of Intent is named after a Covenant carrier in Halo after all. I need some group of chemically imbalanced cool people to come out co-opting the RuptureFarms name to make an EP that sounds like the Mountain Goats if the Mountain Goats had blast beats. Someone out there can do it. So the narrative is told from the perspective of Abe in the present, reflecting on past events. It's neat. I always love that. RuptureFarms is the biggest meat processing plant on Oddworld, allegedly, and it was here that Abe was basically enslaved. He cleaned the floors here at the Charnel House Eternal, and it is here where we get an idea for just how innocent Abe is.
My name is Abe. I was Employee of the Year. Now I'm dead meat. I crossed the meanest boss in the world. Mullet.
Something about Abe's verbiage really just sells the story for me. We've seen story after story where the main character is so full of piss and vinegar, so aware of how thoroughly life has bent them over, that they always sound like some variant of the disgruntled feller from that one game that simulates being generally satisfied with the direction of your life.
My whole life is just
Warmth, loving joy.
Here, though, this is different. Abe is a commoner. A common commoner. He is a suffering little dude, sure, but with that said, he has found the mirth within his gear-driving existence. As for his opinion on his predicament that he has found himself in here, he doesn't show anger. He doesn't even show frustration in general unless he gets zapped by a prayer blocker. The emotion he shows here is almost as if he's more frustrated with himself than anything else. That paired with his character design, his lips appearing to be stitched shut, which has its own implications. And vocal delivery. The voice acting in this game was also done by Lorne Lanning himself. Top-notch stuff. Also really just sells it. This is a game that thrives on the little details, and this opening scene sets that precedent. It's about this point that we start approaching the iconic shot that exists in this opening cutscene. Abe starts running down the list of animals that RuptureFarms has been turning into money, starting with the Meaches that were hunted to extinction. Apparently Meaches were supposed to be in the game. Here's some concept art, but you see they were cut from Abe's Odyssey's release due to memory concerns. Good on them for writing a system limitation into the in-game lore. Beyond the Meaches though, they're still making paramite pies and scrab cakes. Abe happens upon this annual board meeting where profits are down. But guys, we have a solution.
It was us.
This is the tipping point into uh-oh SpaghettiOs. Within seconds, an AI-generated mugshot of Abe the Mudokan is plastered all around the facility, and we are plunged into the belly of a shark. Here we are, playing the story that Abe is telling us from his captivity. Everything is an inferno. Our perspective keeps moving outward and inward, and then we've got to sneak around to keep from waking up these sligs. Oh, that's right, I haven't really talked about sligs yet, despite me name-dropping them a few times. Sligs are the biomechanical long arm of RuptureFarms' law, both obtainers of unharnessed biomass for their products and the brutal guides meant to keep everyone in line. They will one-tap you if you get in their line of sight. That, and they also have some form of sleep apnea that prevents them from waking up while you're squeaking past them. This opening area is really all about showing you the way things work, using environmental hazards to kill sligs and whatnot. One small change between the past and the present is that Abe has an infinite supply of these bottle caps here that he can throw to lure enemies into compromising positions. Yeah, I'm not very good at them. As we get closer to the outside world, we get a different backdrop, and these steam vents show up that we can use to hide from sligs. It's cool. We also get introduced to one of this game's favorite tricks where they place enemies in the background to try and snipe you in the foreground. It's pretty neat. Okay, so right here, despite the fact that I've been dying at an alarming clip up until right now, this point right here is where it becomes apparent what the deal with this game is going to be. Granted, the remake isn't as hard as the original. I can almost guarantee that. But that doesn't mean that there still isn't moments of startling cruelty to be found here as well. Do you see this mine? They can be turned off if you get in real close and slap box the top of it while the top is turned green. With that said, remember what I said about this game's movement? Not to change the subject too abruptly, but have you ever played the original Castlevania? You know, the one with a soundtrack that makes me want to go back to the year 2019 and live my worst life possible, but in a really cool way that's awesome? Well, if you have, then you'll recall that Simon Belmont's whip has just the slightest delay from input to actual attack. It makes you plan out your actions and think at least 1 to 2 steps ahead. That's how every movement in this game is, from jumping to ledge grabbing to running, etc. Slapping these mines is no exception, and when it invariably doesn't work, yeah, that's gonna happen a lot. Maybe not always from these particular types of mines, but in general as a whole. Abe is going to be getting jibbed like it's the mid-2000s and Unreal Tournament 2004 just came out. The movement in this game would honestly be incredibly frustrating if it didn't feel so rewarding to pull off. Also, special shout out to how hard falling objects in this game fall out of the fucking sky. Here at the end of the RuptureFarms escape, we get to pay a visit to the boom machine. They give out grenades. Now, I have no idea why the gluckins that run the show here at RuptureFarms would have grenade dispensaries all over the everywhere, but whatever, I don't make the rules. You can use them to kill sligs and blow up mines. They're thrown the same way bottle caps are thrown. You'll notice in the footage that I'm having a hard time aiming the grenades. I'll explain that when I get to it. The grenades are fun, plus there's an element of strategy, what with holding the grenades just long enough to cook them so it explodes at the right point during its throwing arc, kind of like the dynamite and blood. It's fun stuff. As we make our great escape, we get a cutscene of Abe Deus Ex Machinaing his way across a conveyor belt, escaping sheerly accidentally. On to the next thing. So, periodically, as you progress through the game, and mainly in these really industrial areas, we have these scoreboards, and yeah, I made a couple of cosmic errors in the first level. I'll get to that later. These are motion sensors. Here's what happens when you fail. There are also a couple of scrabs down here. I don't ever drop down to see what's what with them. They look like they would not appreciate the art form that is an original Formula 4 Loco. We also see a swarm of fireflies that can be prayed into giving hints. This is the first of many. It's neat stuff. Not too far beyond the Flaming Gulch, we get to see Mullock the Gluckin see his whole squad get wiped by the rough equivalent of a level 3 RuneScape player. Poor bastard. Now it's nighttime, and things are still super dangerous. And also, for what it's worth, out of my own sheer stubbornness, I have not started save scumming yet, which I'm sure causes me more pain than I would have experienced otherwise. I'll point out the point in time when I do start save scumming. That's just disrespectful. After saying an obscene prayer to get past these sligs, we end up with this shit. It's ridiculous. To quote AVGN, look at the pattern here. What the fuck is that? Really? Really? Now we've got rocks. Rocks are cool. You can use them to blow up mines. Has a lot of strategic possibility, as well as a couple of other things. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. We also meet slogs. You want to know what a slog is? Think of a Jack Russell Terrier if a Jack Russell Terrier was an unmitigated bastard. And that's what a slog is. They're surprisingly tricky, especially considering that they don't have the same sleep apnea that sligs have, so merely tiptoeing by them is not an option. And here at the end of the stage, there's just a small militia of them just disguising their hunger for violence as much needed sleep. Gnarly. Hey, check this out.
A big moon was before me, and its face was my paw. Then I fell down a cliff.
Yeah, I'll never get tired of the voice acting in this game. So Abe gets vibe checked by gravity on the way down this cliff, right? When this big face, Abe's words, not mine, shows up, declares Abe dead, and then does some wild mystical bullshit to not only resurrect Abe, but to also let him know what his next task is in the form of a DMT trip. That task being to survive the nests of the paramites and the scrabs or something. I don't know. Look, the land is changing, everything is dying, and that meat processing plant that we just sprinted out of is the reason why. Time to go in this temple and engage the training montage. So there is a huge part of this game that, if this game were to be a movie, would be shrunk down to being just a training montage. I mean, look, we're adults, right? We've all seen Team America World Police, so you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Lorne Lanning set out to tell movie-quality stories, going so far as to push for the original Abe's Odyssey to not even have the option to turn off music mid-game, because, and I quote, "You can't turn off music in a movie, so why should that be an option here?" Therefore, we get this Rocky-esque training montage, but minus the montage, just training. And it goes for a while. Here we enter what amounts to being a Mudokan temple, dubbed the Mosaic Lines, and it serves basically as a default hub world for Paramonia and Scrabania. Don't worry, we'll get to those soon enough. It has a bunch of puzzles and some hazards to navigate, which at first made no sense to me as the player, because if this is the native homeland of the Mudokan people, then why, in the name of the 10th song of Morbid Angel's third record Covenant, would they leave all of this dangerous bullshit around their home? But then I eventually ran across some sligs and it all made sense. Mudokans canonically not being able to bench thin air despite the fact that they have a body that, at least visibly speaking, is riddled with gains. It explains the fact that they really are just home aloneing it for the foreseeable future. We get some training on how to speak to our fellow Mudokans, how to possess sligs, how to tube, how to bell, how to touch stone for a bell song and then bell again. You know, all of the things that will be important for the next 5 hours or so of self-replicating cruelty. At this point, the game also starts teasing us with this power-up that is referred to as the Shrike-Hull. It goes completely bananas, but we haven't gotten there yet. After completing all of the mandated on-the-job training, we reach the portals to Paramonia and Scrabania, and it is here, my friends, where we knock out the first of the Big Face's requests. So we're here in the land of the Paramites, and you know what? I haven't spoken about the character design much since the opening blurb of this video, where you see I feel like how novel some of the character design is really speaks for itself, but the Paramites take it to another level. They look so otherworldly, bordering on arbitrary, but the design still immediately makes sense. You know what the face is, even if the face isn't a face, it's fingers. You know which side is the back, etc, etc. I really don't know how they did it, but it's good stuff. After clearing out some mines, we get an Elam, you know, mule spelled backwards. He runs really fast, and we have these Battletoads-esque turbo tunnel sections, except the Elam isn't a bike, and we're never in a tunnel during these sections. The rant I went on earlier about how the movement in this game feels extends to the Elam, which makes things a bit frustrating, but still very satisfying when you achieve victory. We reach this area where our Elam gets distracted by some honey dripping off of a beehive, and if you remember when I referenced the fact that I was having a struggle with aiming some grenades in the first level, well, you see, friends, this is where I figured out what was wrong. So, in the remake of the game, there are two native control layouts. There's one for controller and one for mouse and keyboard. And since I am one of the most stubborn organisms to ever organism, I am rolling with mouse and keyboard, which is all fine and dandy, but here's where the trick is. So there's a setting in the menu for using the mouse and keyboard, and that setting will activate mouse aim. With that said, that setting is not automatically turned on. Ergo, if mouse aim is not activated, Abe will not aim. I tried rebinding some of the other controls. It did less than 0. So as you can imagine, when I found the setting innocuously sitting in the menu as if its absence had not been the cause of my blood pressure going ape shit for the past several minutes, people, I had to pause the game and walk away so I didn't shift my home off of its foundation. Anyway, after activating mouse aim and splitting this beehive in half with it, before then taking a nap to make the rage between my ears go away, it is time to move on with life. Call me Taz circa 2003 every time Brock Lesnar was in the ring, because here comes the pain. Before I get up to my neck about this section of the game that easily gave me the most trouble, I'll come clean and let it be known that I suffered greatly at the hands of this opening combat. It did not occur to me that I could stand in the background and possess a slig in the foreground until after I had gotten Abe killed about 15 times. My bad. Beyond that, do you see these bats? Fuck these fucking bats! More on that shortly. Here we are at the Paramite nests. basically 6 challenge rooms that must be completed in order to progress. In each one of them, there is a fire that must be lit for the room to be considered completed, and then there's a bell song that must be played in order to escape the room. That's simple enough on its surface. With that said, I suffered tremendously in these paramite nests. Now, the paramites themselves aren't really the problem. That is, unless they spawn into the area pre-aggroed. As far as gameplay mechanics go, they have a really interesting trick to them that's pretty easy to manage, until it's not. If they see you, they'll follow you, but they won't attack you unless they start getting cornered. If cornered, though, you're done. Start over. Also, in the middle of this hub room, there's this central pillar that you can come to that gives you a rough layout of what each room entails. It's handy if for no other reason other than to know exactly how many ibuprofen you need to have lined up. In the first room, I get access to spirit rings. They're cool. I communicated with a Mudokan, and he warbled in tongues for a minute, and now I have a red ring that can be used to blow up mines. It's a big deal. For an example, I use these rings to blow up these bombs underneath me and then above me. Plus, every time you use your spirit rings, since they're a single-use type deal, you can still go back to the Mudokan in question and get hooked back up. With that said, those spirit rings won't make it through a door, which is strange, but the rules are the rules. Also, we get introduced to the use of meat. You can use meat to distract the paramites. Also very handy so long as you know what you're doing. After striking the flint, go grab the bell song and room 1 is finished. Next up is the, oh, god damn it! Behold, this one nest caused me the most grief of anything in this entire game. A dissertation-linked aneurysm in every sense of the phrase. It starts off with there being a couple of sligs that need to be drawn over closer to where you spawn in at so that you can possess one of them and then practice the tried and true discipline of revenge. Nothing unheard of. But then you get these 3 jumps. In no uncertain terms, my friends, fuck these jumps. Freeze frame for a second so I can explain the situation we're in. So upon approach, you'll notice these 3 chasms, with 3 spiked balls swinging in and out on the screen from a fixed position. That's fine, it's whatever. With that said, the first problem comes with how narrow these platforms are. I referenced the Belmont hesitation phenomenon of 1986 again because this is the spot in the game where I dare say that the controls feel incredibly cheap. Everything must be done deliberately, sure, that's no different. But with the platforms being so narrow, it's easy to land your jump and then go to try and crouch, only to then get clobbered because Abe decided it was time to climb down the ledge because you're 2 pixels within range for the ledge grabbing action to execute, and Abe, thanks to his meticulous and measured pace of motion, dies because he moves at the speed of fucking erosion. Okay, I hear you lovely people saying, just don't crouch. What's the problem? Well, my friends, the problem comes in the form of this hepatitis-riddled winged rodent flying in a rhombus pattern over the second platform. Bats, like everything else in the game that can hurt Abe, are remarkably dangerous, which brings me to a particular point. Abe does indeed have a health bar in the remake, unlike the original game. If you see some birds hanging out somewhere, you can chant, and they'll go to that spot floating over Abe's head, and it acts essentially as a de facto health bar, which is allegedly another quality of life adjustment, I'm sure, but it does not matter as you'll still be rendered gravesent in milliseconds faster than you can say shaped glass. So about this bat, what must be done? Well, you've got to land on the second platform, then crouch to duck the bat, and then time the oscillation of the boulder with the flight path of the suggestively circling overhead aviating syphilis possum so that you may get a parabola that is not interrupted by either of those 2 forces, or the fact that Abe likes to pause and lose his shit when he gets too close to the edge of a jump in a fucking platformer, only to then get to the other side, get the checkpoint, and then do it all again! Look, I didn't start quick saving in this game until a room or 2 after this one, so I'm sure having to go back and delete 2 sligs at the start of this room every time I died a dishonorable death at the hands of this platforming setup, at least before I got the checkpoint, added to my disgruntlement, and without a doubt, that added frustration is indeed self-inflicted, but that doesn't change the fact that this shit ain't right. I don't know what to tell you. By the way, for your viewing pleasure, I've just been showing every time I died going through this situation for the last few moments without any of my typical timing because there's nothing in the situation to focus on when the whole situation is a virtual penitentiary. Damn. Also, one more thing. These are supposed to be paramite nests, but the hardest paramite nest in the game doesn't have a single paramite to be found. Did they just outsource the labor for being an unrepentant pain in the ass to the leader of the Chiroptera? Does this mean that paramites have a vested interest in shaving labor costs? And if they're so goddamn smart to know the economic advantages that come with selling out your local workforce, then one would think that maybe they'd stop getting caught by RuptureFarms all the time. You beings and your flangy faces are a crime against the quasi-nature of Oddworld, and you deserve to go extinct. I think this game just turned me into the Monopoly Man. So I finally accidentally fumbled my way through that whole situation and beyond the asphyxiation configuration to go to the next nest. Paramites are back. This nest has a neat mechanic that involves there being some pressure plates on the floor that can be used to bonk a parasite that is in pursuit. With that said, that same platform will bonk you if you're not careful, so be warned. This room is a relaxing change of pace, even if I still died a whole bunch during it. The pre-aggroed paramites dropping out of the sky after lighting the torch is a nice touch and a fun challenge to have to navigate. Then on the back end of the room, you've got to draw this one paramite out so that you can get to the bell song, lest the paramite in question turns around and, to quote Tom Segura, punches Abe's chest through Abe's back. Next room is a cavalcade of sadism similar to the second room that we went through, complete with the paramites outsourcing their labor again. The difference here, though, being that it just starts off with the sadistic bullshit, and it has two bats! Thankfully, I fumbled through the situation quickly, sparing my home from otherwise deserved damages. This is also the room where I started quick saving, namely because there's a slog up here and a deactivated mine at the bottom, and I didn't want to go all the way back down to the bottom of the room after every time I died to activate that particular mine, because you see, it's a simple calculus and you've got to blow up that slog. You make him fall down and then he'd go boom boom. It's beautiful. If you don't blow him up, this happens. After navigating across the asphyxiation configuration part 2 barometric whoop-de-woo, we play our bell song and move to room 5. This room is easier on my blood pressure than room 4, thankfully, although the first time I went through it, I forgot to light the torch. That's my bad. Apparently it was hiding in this corner up here. Now for the finale of the paramite nests. Guys, I promise I have an easier time with this game after escaping Paramonia. This room is also not unfairly brutal, but we do get the pleasure of tubing around, which is nice. It's also fairly spacious. Fuck this one paramite in particular. We travel far and wide to get our torch lit before narrowly avoiding disaster to play our bell song and making our way out of Paramonia. One last mad dash is all that is needed to make our way back to the mosaic lines. The traps here are still tricky, but the area is really all about moving forward at whatever cost. This is basically a bipedal warthog run for lack of better comparison. The only reprieve we get is when we do some minor tubing around. We make our ascension and take an audience with the big face where we get a neat symbol on the back of Abe's hand. After returning back to the mosaic lines and scurrying around for a little bit, we take the tube down and enter Scrabania. So where Paramonia was a lush forest, Scrabania is an elevated desert. This initial situation we find ourselves in here is admittedly frustrating, but after dying about 37 times, I finally get it all sorted out. Took me a hot minute to realize this lever was here. Once you knock out the first slig, the rest just falls into place. And then we get our Elam. This whole stretch really in Scrabania is very similar to what we experienced previously in Paramonia. What with the long extended Elam runs and having to make my way through extended platforming sections for spirit rings and passwords, which is fun and all. Some of the platforming though is noticeably trickier, however. Take this section for example. Much Mudokan blood was spilled here and there was nothing I could do to stop it. There's also this section where my Elam gets distracted by some dripping honey because he's a filthy casual. After making it past this gauntlet with sligs in the background to get a password, I get to use some spirit rings on some mines, and then I get to go try and outrun death from killer bees. A brutal task. I was disrespected incessantly. After that, it's still more of the standard fare, passwords, spirit rings, Elam run quick. I had fun with it. This one particular Elam run is brutal because there's a sleeping slig on the track who will not get trampled by your inverted mule, but will damn sure wake up with the quickness and put hot lead through your shoulder blades. I just ran straight forward and got lucky. It was the only thing that worked. Who's the asshole that programmed this? After clearing the path ahead with yet another wanton abuse of spirit rings, we finally arrived to the Temple of the Scrabs. May death lie ahead. Okay, friends, good news. The Scrabanian Temple did not cause me nearly as much grief as the Paramonian Temple. Now, don't get me wrong, there is still pain to be found here. A not insignificant amount. This first opening room right here is even a bit tricky, but, you know, after that, this is comparatively a romp through roses as opposed to a square dance on a landmine that I experienced previously. The Scrab acts differently than the Paramite, but in a much more manageable way. While the Paramite waited to be cornered to try and evict your soul from your flesh flesh coffin, the Scrab acts more like a stereotypical bull, or a wind-up rhinoceros if Serious Sam 2 has anything to say about it. They'll charge you on sight, they have no time for negotiation. They will also, on sight, fuck each other up. They're honestly like Hemi-powered stray cats, the more I think about it. So here we have 8 rooms to charge through. Thankfully, none of them angered me too badly, so I'll try and get through these rather quickly. The first room I did was a vaguely claustrophobic affair, but thankfully it didn't cause me much grief. Just had to use some rocks to clear these mines to get the bell sung, and I was on my way to victory. The second room was pretty wide open. Had to cross heaven and earth to go find the bell song, but I still got out with my blood pressure intact. We're on fire currently. Room number 3 sees the return of these woodland creatures outsourcing their labor, as evidenced by these sligs hanging around everywhere. It's dumb. Complete with the first lever that I need to pull directly in range of a back-sitting sniper with a floating C-block ready to prevent me from getting in any offense. It's classic Oddworld Tampa 2 defense. I get a lucky sprint across the way, possess a slig, take some lives, standard fare. Beyond that, getting the torch and the bell song is easy. Room 4, we've got Scrabs in the background, Scrabs on the high ground, Scrabs punching each other. This room is a mess. It's awesome. GG, no re, easy win. Room 5 is also a mess, but it's more notable for something out of the way that I ran across. I find a secret room here with a Scrab and a bunch of Mudokons to save. You see, in this game, and some of these other levels that are beyond Rupture Farms, there are these little portals you can go to save spare Mudokons. They're not super common though, and this is the only one that I found, but I am happy to have ran across one here organically. This little secret room is fun at least. There's a bunch of Mudokons that are on the top level, and you gotta get their attention so that you can send them through a bird portal that is also on the upper level. Good little brain teaser. Room 6 is more vertically oriented at first. There's nothing like getting swantoned by an upper level Scrab, or blasted by one charging from off the screen. Beyond that, the room stood no chance. Room 7 is kind of a joke. Here's my first expiration. And watch this douche canoe capitalize on me fumbling with the elevator. Hey guys, who had the parlay on the animal fight? The final room isn't too crazy, not much noteworthy to say, GG no re, it's an easy dub all day. With that said, watch this Scrab kill me on this elevator. The mad dash to escape the Scrabanian temple is more of a mad dash than ever. Death is eagerly awaiting for you to make a misstep. It's a hateful endeavor. Now look at this guy sitting on this half-done elevator. I know for damn sure he didn't yoink on those cables himself. He doesn't even have any palms for thumbs to be attached to. After that dashing escape, we get our next cutscene. The big face blasts a scar on the back of Abe's other hand. And my friends, this training montage, minus the montage, has made up the bulk of this game's playtime, as well as the last 11 goddamn pages of this script. For reference of how ridiculous this is, before we enter the mosaic lines, I only had about 5 pages worth of script that dealt with the campaign. We have been here for a while. We get another cutscene showing Abe getting mogged by all of his homies when he is directed to the middle of this room and gets thunder cunted by the spirits of the Paramite and the Scrab, anime protagonist style. This, my friends, what we have just received is the Shrikole, a super death metal kill bomb that effectively acts like a screen wipe for all things bad and all things standing next to things that are bad. It has parameters for its use that will be discussed shortly, but here in this first instance, it seems like you can just use it at will. Do you see this freeze frame? Do you see these jibs? Buddy, it's on. Also, I'd like to point out that in Abe's Odyssey, it looks cursed. I dare say I prefer it. Now it's time for the bipedal blitzkrieg on Abe's former house of servitude. And friends, it's about to get real. You know how I know things are about to get real? Motion sensors with dickishly spaced mines and slogs on the low ground, unmitigated violence. I died a whole bunch here. I didn't even realize that slogs could jump to kill a ledge-hung Abe. Then we've got these swirling spheres of death that look to be spinning in 7 as if Danny Carey himself was doing the timekeeping on them. Died a bunch here too. Then we get the return of steam vents and sleeping sligs. Truth be told, they have the outside of this place pretty well fortified. After dealing with this ridiculously placed slog, we find the back door and we are back in the belly of the shark. Hey, it's like Gulag, but it's spelled wrong. Do you get it? Do you get it? We're here rapidly approaching the end of the line, where you see Abe has the chant, he has the Shrikole, he has the spirit rings. You, as a player, finally have all the pieces needed to shove a slice of your models are insufferable, your prices are unreasonable, and your resources will soon be unobtainable pie right up Rupture Farms' oxidizing asses. This final tear through Rupture Farms is truly splendid. There are 4 Zulage sections of penultimate brilliance, of which this is Zulage 1. It is a grand endeavor. So I know I teased a couple of levels back that the Shrikal has rules. 2 rules exist. Rule number 1, do you see these numbered portals? Get a corresponding number of Mudokons through this numbered portal, and you will then gain a charge for your Shrikal. Rule number 2, don't go through a scanner while you have charges for a Shrikal, or else the infrared light of the scanner scares off the spirits that constitute the Shrikal or something. I don't know. All I know is that it will go away. Also, the scoreboard. Now that we're back in the hole with the Mudokons, it's time to desperately make up for this lost ground. I've got to somehow find 134 Mudokons between now and the moment of truth. Obviously, this means that there are stakes. First major bit of trouble that I run into is dealing with these drilling cleavers that are just out here in the thoroughfare. Wouldn't be much of a problem, but the issue is that there are slogs too. Thankfully, there are 2 paths I can take here, and the left-hand path seems a bit more forgiving, even if it's not entirely necessary to go down. More on that momentarily. Not too long afterwards, I'm shown an example of prime dickheadery. Jesus Christ. So for future reference, here in the Zulage, many slogs will die. Sligs will die too, but slogs especially. Look at the Zerg rush going on here. I mean, slogs look like diet Zerglings too now, the more that I think about it. I didn't have this game hitting me with a 7-pull cheese on my Oddworld bingo card, but here we are. I also end up going on a side quest by following the left-hand path some more. It's fun. I find a tactical shaman who gives me spirit rings. Don't have any idea why he's here or how he's here, but he won't be the last one we run across. That, and we also find the first slig-based password exchange. Hell of a system you got there, Hoss. Check the cheapest thing in this game since the bats from Paramonia. Suffer and die, game. You know the side quest is prim and proper when you end up backtracking back to the beginning of the game where it all started, where a portal exists to send me back towards the hell that I'm supposed to be going through as opposed to the hell that I choose. Lame. Back to the main path and we're on to Zulage 2. So I didn't mention this particular fact up at the top of the level because it didn't really apply too much to Zulage 1, but it definitely applies to Zulage 2 through 4. The type of damage that we are here to do specifically to Rupture Farms is to shut down the power generator, thus stopping production, and we start triggering the mechanisms to kill the power generator here in Zulage 2. I guess there's one in Zulage 1, but you get the picture. I say all of that to say that Zulage 2 brings back the concept of what basically amounts to challenge rooms. Inside of these rooms are where the aforementioned mechanisms are, and I'm gonna be real for a second, this is starting to feel a little bit Crash Bandicootish. It takes 3 times to make a pattern, so here we are. That will never get old. First room isn't tricky. The hardest part is just getting around these prayer blockers. Thankfully, though, I have explosives. Room 2 has a slog kennel right at the front door. It's ridiculous. And then another one at the back end of the room where about 37 emerge from it, approximately. I may be exaggerating, but it's only a little bit. Room 3 starts off fairly innocuously and then ends up giving me a peak excuse to be as bone-rattlingly malignant as possible. It's wonderful. Beyond that, the room is easy. All right, good news. I'm halfway to the fabled 150 before getting into the transit for Zulage 3. Call it Willem Dafoe because things are looking up. First immediate area in Zulage 3 is a chore in 2/3. Makes a man want to lay down on the interstate for a lumbar adjustment. Then we get 3 more challenge rooms where the most disrespectful things possible happen immediately. And then again. And then again. Yeah, the rooms here in Zulage 3 aren't only a bit more difficult, they're also large. Got a great deal of distance to deal with here. What is this dude scrubbing right now? After committing a hateful slathering of war crimes on all the enemies in this room and then activating our mechanism, we head into the second room. Room 2 starts with whatever this is supposed to be. You know, some would say that human self-awareness is Mother Nature's true nightmare. After getting past that, though, life isn't too bad, what with the grenade dispenser on the upper deck. Room 3 is a bit simpler. Trickiest part for me was dispatching all of the sligs after they fall out of the ceiling without ending my friends in the process. Every little homie counts, I don't know what to tell you. Beyond that, we head to Zulage 4, although to be fair, calling that A 4 is disingenuous at best. And wouldn't you guess it, we not only have Crash Bandicoot-esque level selection once again, but we also get idiotically cruel hazard placement in the selection area itself. This game wants me to suffer in an endless fashion, I'm convinced of it. Room 1 is an exercise in futility, namely because I didn't realize that sligs could drive elevators just like Abe. The only thing that I've ever seen these squid-nosed wobblecocks hold with their hands is their shotgun-shaped machine guns. Guys, I spent at least 30 consecutive minutes resisting the urge to burn my skin off with a bottle of Tresemme and a Bic lighter, as what would happen is that I'd clear up all the sligs up top, only to then be obliterated by the sligs on the lower 4. That's a me problem though, I'm not gonna hold it against the game. I actually ended up going backwards to save so I could use at least one slig up top to clear the lower level once I realized that sligs could drive elevators. Once I got that settled though, it was thankfully business as typical, even if it took me forever to figure out the correct series of actions needed to be able to make sure all of Abe's homies could get to safety thanks to this electric fence that kept being activated every time I passed through this sensor. After that, we hit the second room, a room with approximately 8 million slogs. I mean, just look at this. Look at it. Who programmed this? Somewhere the grave mine from Halo 2 is frantically taking notes. At the back end of the room, there are just enough homies to save to give me a Shrikole charge, so obviously, well, I had no choice. Thankfully, though, Zulage 4 only had 2 idiotic rooms, and now we are finally, mercifully, heading into the finishing stretch. The power is down, the lights are off, and to hear Abe tell it,
And there I was in the final hour.
all right, friends, the time has come, and this is for real. This is not a drill. You see this? Not that. Everyone's in a tizzy. Mullock is pissed, and I'm sure the rest of the execs are in the exact same yacht. We've currently got 2.5 minutes to the rest of our lives. The urgency, however, does not stop this game's hazard placement from being remarkably vindictive. I should expect nothing less at this point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
You know, I probably should have looked at what they had going on down there. I charge up the Shrikole and I drop down to the lower level, landing in the executive meeting. And then... oh, that's wild. I hit the lever to turn off the gas to RuptureFarms, and we engage the final cutscene. Friends, we are back in the first scene of the game. Abe appearing doomed. Mullock walks into the room. He walks in with his favorite slig, I guess. They open up the floor to reveal a maelstrom of cleavers. Times are dark. The game then transitions to the Council of Not Abes, discussing the topic of Abe. Apparently, they have figured out that Abe is in bad shape. The big face is pleading his case with some higher council, I guess, of Mudokons. And then what happens?
Let him.
These malnourished sons of bitches let Abe get turned into the first Mudokan pop. But not only that, one of them called me a schmuck!
What do you think? It was a schmuck.
So do you remember what I said about there being 2 different endings? Well, friends, I came up 17 homies short from getting the good ending. My drastic error from stage 1, it has cost me. So I go back to stage 1 and I wrangle up all the loose Mudokons that I can find that are just out and running around. When all is said and done, I still enter the stockyards with 56 casualties. Where are the rest of them? So I try again. Friends, acquaintances, first-time viewers of the channel even. Look at this. Bro, what in the... Yeah, I'm gonna be real. I consulted the internet for that, but hey, at least I beat the game legitimately first. There's apparently a few of these underground hatches that have a slew of Mudokons in them. This explains where all of my casualties came from. I'm not going to go into some grievous detail about my experience with getting them out. Just know that when I returned to the boardroom, I was ready. I set off the alarms. I died about 37 times in this room again. I ran down here. I turned off the mines. I charged up my key, fell down the trapdoor, went Super Saiyan, died once, activated my quick save, charged up my key again, hit the trapdoor, knocked out every GDP head in the room, and braced myself for what was to come. Mullock walks in, the lever is flipped, the floor opens, and then the power of non-Euclidean Deus Ex Machina happens. The Council of Praying Not Abes 360 no-scopes Mullock and his slig hoss from across the map, unleashing the biggest swerve of all. The The senior big face turns up and then proceeds to turn Abe into some butterflies to get him to safety. And our endlessly outgunned hero proves once and for all that if you can simply become something unhinged from the standard rules of corporeal existence, then you can also become a multi-angled death crustacean capable of solving any given problem up to and including the subjugation of your own kind. How relatable. That was fun. If difficult, the 90s was a lawless place. Thanks to the fact that New and Tasty sold millions of units, 2.4 million by the year of 2018 to be exact, it did well enough for Oddworld Inhabitants to create Oddworld Soulstorm, which is an entire other can of worms that I will get into when the time comes. Just know that because life is an unironic douchebag that likes to feed on misanthropy Cheerios, both runs of a franchise that focus on the dastardly deeds of big business and industrial negligence have been stymied due to the actions of big business and industrial negligence. While the former run of the franchise may have been blunted due to the disastrous release of Stranger's Wrath, for the latter run of the franchise, the stumbling block in question was the fact that Soulstorm was released for free on PlayStation Plus at release, absolutely eviscerating potential sales. Look, truth be told, at the end of the day, I don't know what's next for the Oddworld franchise. I mean, as much as I'd love to hang out at the Oddworld Inhabitants office and have a conversation with a few of these lovely people, it's just not in the cards. But what I do know is that, based on its own merit, New and Tasty is a damn fun game and a charming love letter to what came before it. At some point down the road, I'll have to tackle the other games in the franchise that have escaped my clutches to this point, which is basically everything else beyond Munch's Odyssey. Look, the Oddworld franchise is on my list now. There is no escape. But for now, well, friends, the next drop is going to be something that is long overdue. Much love, friends, and I'll see you all soon. Peace.